The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly floated in the darkness of space, orbiting the neutral world they called Axis Prime. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sectors, their faces showing fear. The air filtration systems worked overtime to handle the different atmospheres each species needed, creating a constant hum that usually provided comfort. Today, that hum felt like a death rattle. Ambassador Velkoth of the Krithian Empire stood at the central podium, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. His voice boomed through the translation devices everyone wore. "The frontier sectors will belong to the Krithian Empire by the end of this cycle," he declared. "You have 7 standard days to evacuate your colonies. After that, any ship, any station, any being that remains will be considered an act of war." Silence filled the chamber. The frontier sectors contained dozens of colony worlds and resource operations belonging to the younger species. Abandoning them would mean economic collapse for many civilizations. But fighting the Krithians meant something worse than collapse. It meant extinction. The Aelthari representative, an ancient being that looked like flowing water given form, spoke with a voice like wind through crystals. "War Chancellor, please reconsider. Those worlds have been settled for generations. Surely we can reach a diplomatic solution." Velkoth's laugh was harsh and cruel. "Diplomacy is for equals. You are not our equals. You have 7 days." In the human section, Ambassador David Chen sat quietly, his face unreadable. Earth had joined the galactic community only 52 years ago. In that time, humanity had been seen as curious but ultimately insignificant. They had no great warrior tradition like the Krithians, no ancient wisdom like the Aelthari, no technological supremacy like the Gen Consortium. Humans were just the newcomers who asked too many questions and built things that seemed primitive compared to alien technology. Chen pressed the button to request permission to speak. A soft chime indicated his request had been logged. The Assembly's coordinator, a multi-limbed being from the Trell Collective, glanced at the request list and sighed. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth," the coordinator announced with barely hidden reluctance. Chen stood and walked to one of the secondary podiums. He was a small man by human standards, barely 1.7 meters tall, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that he wore more from habit than need. Around the chamber, representatives shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered to their aides. A few openly laughed. "Honorable Assembly," Chen began, his voice calm and measured. "The Krithian ultimatum threatens not just the frontier sectors, but the foundation of this assembly. If we allow territorial conquest through threat of force, we abandon the principles that hold our civilization together." Velkoth turned to face the human, amusement clear in his expression. "The human speaks of civilization. Tell me, Ambassador, how many wars has Earth won against galactic powers? How many fleets do you command? Your species has mining ships and colony transports. You have no warships, no weapons that could threaten even the smallest Krithian vessel. Why should anyone listen to you?" More laughter rippled through the chamber. Even species that sympathized with Earth found the situation absurd. The Krithian Empire had never lost a war in 3,000 years. Their military doctrine had been refined across centuries of conquest. They had 10,000 warships assembled at the border of the frontier sectors right now, each one capable of reducing a planet's surface to molten glass. Chen nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. "You're right, War Chancellor. Earth's official registry shows only civilian vessels. We have been quiet members of this assembly, asking our questions, observing your customs, learning your histories, learning to cower." "You mean?" Velkoth sneered. "Learning," Chen repeated, and something in his tone made a few of the more perceptive representatives sit up straighter. "Tell me, War Chancellor, in those 3,000 years of Krithian military supremacy, how many times has your empire fought an enemy that truly surprised you?" Velkoth's eyes narrowed. "We do not need surprises. Our strength is absolute." "Of course," Chen said quietly. He returned to his seat without another word. The assembly debated for hours, but everyone knew how it would end. The Krithian Empire was too powerful. The other species were too divided. The frontier sectors would fall, and the younger civilizations would have to accept it. Some representatives suggested sending a formal protest. Others recommended economic sanctions that everyone knew would be meaningless. The Althari proposed a strongly worded resolution. War Chancellor Velkoth listened to it all with barely concealed contempt. When the debate finally wound down, he stood once more. 7 days, he repeated. We will not extend this deadline. We will not negotiate. The age of Crithian dominance continues and the age of lesser species ends. Accept this reality. He was about to leave the podium when alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the station. Red warning lights bathed the chamber in crimson. The coordinator's multiple appendages flew across holographic controls. Unknown vessel detected at the system's edge, the coordinator announced, its voice tight with confusion. It just emerged from FTL, single ship. Transmitting identification codes. Holographic displays materialized above the assembly floor, showing sensor data. A vessel had appeared at the outer reaches of the Axis Prime system, roughly 4 light hours from the assembly station itself. Long-range sensors painted a basic profile. The ship was roughly 800 meters long, sleek, and moving at speeds that seemed almost leisurely for FTL-capable craft. Identification confirmed, the coordinator continued. The vessel is registered to Earth. Designation, Terran Vanguard. Every eye in the chamber turned to Ambassador Chen. He sat calmly in his seat, hands folded in his lap, looking at the display with mild interest. Ambassador Chen, the coordinator demanded, what is the meaning of this? Earth has no military vessels. This ship is not in our registry. Chen stood again, moving with the same measured pace as before. The Terran Vanguard was launched from Earth orbit 6 months ago. She's been conducting deep space trials. I suppose she's finished her tests. Velkoth stared at the human, then at the sensor display, then back at the human. His mouth opened to say something, but no words came out. Finally, he managed, 1 ship. You sent 1 ship to this meeting? I didn't send her, Chen corrected. She came on her own initiative. I imagine Commander Okonkwo heard about the assembly session and decided to attend. Commander? The War Chancellor's voice dripped with mockery now, recovering from his momentary surprise. You have 1 ship with 1 commander? This is your grand response to Crithian power? Other representatives began laughing again, louder this time. The tension that had gripped the chamber since Velkoth's ultimatum released in waves of mocking laughter. Even the Althari, normally diplomatic, seemed to find dark humor in Earth's apparent foolishness. Chen waited for the laughter to die down. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but somehow it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. War Chancellor, you asked me how many times in 3,000 years your empire has fought an enemy that truly surprised you. I don't think you understood my question. I wasn't asking about your past. He paused, his eyes meeting Velkoth's directly. I was asking about your future. The sensor displays updated. The Terran Vanguard had increased speed. It was moving toward the inner system now, directly toward the Crithian armada that waited at the frontier sector border. Velkoth's eyes widened as he saw the trajectory. Is this human insane? That ship is heading straight for our fleet. Yes, Chen agreed simply. She is. Our fleet will destroy it in seconds. Perhaps. Chen's expression remained neutral. Or perhaps, War Chancellor, the next 4 minutes will teach the galaxy something it has forgotten. What's that? Velkoth demanded. Ambassador Chen smiled for the first time since the session began. It was not a friendly smile. That humanity didn't spend 50 years in your assembly learning to cower. We spent 50 years learning how to ensure we would never need to. The holographic displays showed the Terran Vanguard continuing its approach, and across the chamber, representatives leaned forward in their seats, unable to look away. The Terran Vanguard cut through space like a knife through water, leaving a trail of exotic particles that made sensor operators across the system scratch their heads in confusion. Inside the assembly station, every species with access to long-range sensors had them locked onto the human ship. What they saw made no sense. The vessel's energy signature was impossible. Standard fusion drives, even the advanced antimatter systems the Gen Consortium had developed, produced predictable power curves. The Terran Vanguard's power output spiked and dipped in patterns that violated several known laws of thermodynamics. The ship's hull material reflected sensor beams in ways that suggested it wasn't entirely present in normal space. Scan that vessel. War Chancellor Velkoth commanded his fleet coordinator through his communication device. I want to know what weapons it carries. At the border of the frontier sectors, thousands of Crithian warships hung in perfect formation. Each vessel bristled with plasma cannons, missile batteries, and mass accelerators. The smallest destroyer in their fleet massed 50,000 tons. The largest dreadnoughts were mobile fortresses 3 kilometers long, carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The response from the fleet coordinator came back quickly. War Chancellor, our sensors cannot penetrate the vessel's hull. The composition is unknown. We detect massive power generation, but cannot identify the source. It appears to be using some form of quantum field manipulation for propulsion, but the mathematics don't work. The ship shouldn't be able to move at all, yet it's accelerating at 0.7 light speed. Velkoth's scales rippled with irritation. Then when it enters weapons range, destroy it. I want the debris recovered for analysis. In the human section of the assembly, Ambassador Chen activated a secure channel to the Terran Vanguard. Commander Okonkwo, you're drawing quite a bit of attention. The response came immediately, a woman's voice calm and almost cheerful. Good morning, Ambassador. Or should I say good afternoon? I always lose track of time in deep space. I heard the Crithians were making threats again. The situation is delicate, Commander. The situation is simple, sir. Bullies need to be reminded that not everyone is weaker than they are. There was a pause. Permission to engage demonstration protocols? Chen looked up at the holographic display showing the Crithian fleet. 10,000 ships. 3,000 years of unbroken military victory. He thought about Earth's history, about the wars humanity had fought among themselves, about the lessons learned in blood and fire across centuries of conflict. Then he thought about what his species had built in secret over the past 50 years. Permission granted, Commander. Show them what we've learned. Aboard the Terran Vanguard, Commander Sarah Okonkwo smiled. She was 32 years old, born in Lagos, educated at MIT and the Beijing Institute of Theoretical Physics, and she had volunteered for this mission, knowing she might not survive it. The ship around her was smaller than a Crithian dreadnought, but represented humanity's complete understanding of every scientific principle they'd learned from the galaxy, then pushed far beyond what anyone thought possible. Ship status? She asked. The artificial intelligence that helped run the Terran Vanguard responded instantly. All systems optimal. Quantum displacement drive at 100%. Gravitational weapons charged. Causality torpedoes loaded. Point defense grid active. We are ready, Commander. Sarah studied the tactical display. 500 Crithian warships were breaking formation, moving to interceptor. Standard tactics, she noted. The Crithians had used the same basic approach for centuries. Overwhelming force applied with brutal efficiency. It worked when your enemies fought the same way you did. Humanity had never been very good at following expected patterns. Time to engagement? She asked. At current approach speed, 30 seconds until the Crithians enter their maximum effective weapons range. Sarah touched a control, and the Terran Vanguard's acceleration increased dramatically. The tactical display updated as Crithian sensors registered the change. Back at the assembly station, representatives watched in stunned silence as the human ship suddenly jumped from 0.7 light speed to 0.95 light speed in less than 2 seconds. The acceleration should have turned any living being aboard into paste, yet the ship maneuvered smoothly. What kind of inertial dampening technology is that? A gen engineer whispered. Those G-forces should be lethal. The Crithian warships opened fire at maximum range. Space lit up with plasma bolts hot enough to vaporize steel. Missiles streaked forward, each one carrying warheads that could level a city. Mass accelerator rounds, solid slugs of depleted uranium moving at relativistic speeds, filled the space between the fleets. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The Terran Vanguard disappeared, not exploded, not destroyed, simply ceased to exist in that location, and reappeared 500 kilometers behind the Crithian formation, completely untouched by the devastating barrage. What? Velkoth stared at the sensor displays. What was that? Ambassador Chen leaned back in his seat. That, War Chancellor, is quantum entanglement applied to macro-scale objects. Your scientists probably told you it was impossible. Our scientists agreed, right up until they figured out how to do it anyway. The Terran Vanguard didn't pause after its impossible maneuver. From its bow, something that looked like empty space itself began to twist. The targeting systems of every ship in the area registered a massive gravitational anomaly forming. Sarah's fingers danced across her controls. Firing gravitational lance. Target, Dreadnought Cluster Alpha. What emerged from the Terran Vanguard wasn't a conventional weapon. It was a beam of twisted spacetime, a controlled singularity projected forward at the speed of light. When it touched the first Crythian dreadnought, the massive warship simply crumpled. 3 kilometers of armored hull compressed down to a sphere roughly 10 meters across in less than a second. The gravity well was so intense that the 2 dreadnoughts on either side were pulled toward it, their hulls shrieking as structural members failed. Commander Okonkwo adjusted her aim. Another gravitational lance shot out, catching a second cluster of warships. More ships compressed, imploded, ceased to exist as anything but super-dense spheres of crushed matter. In the assembly chamber, several representatives physically retreated from the holographic displays, as if the images themselves were dangerous. The Aelthari's form rippled with shock. The Gen engineers were frantically taking notes, their hands shaking. "This is not possible," one of them muttered. "Controlled singularities require more energy than a star produces." "The containment fields alone would need what?" Chen asked quietly. "Would need technology you don't have? Theories you haven't developed? Humanity has spent 50 years listening to every species in this assembly explain what was impossible. We took notes." The Crythian fleet, to their credit, didn't panic. Not at first. They were warriors trained across generations, veterans of 1,000 battles. The intercepting force split into smaller groups, trying to surround the human ship from multiple angles. Crossfire patterns that had worked for centuries began forming. Sarah saw it coming. The Crythians were predictable because they were so experienced. Experience bred patterns, and patterns could be exploited. "Point defense to active mode," she commanded. "Let's show them what humanity does with energy weapons." The next barrage of Crythian plasma fire lit up the darkness. Thousands of superheated bolts converged on the Terran Vanguard from every angle. This time the ship didn't dodge. The bolts struck the ship's shields and something remarkable happened. Instead of absorbing the energy or deflecting it, the shields captured it. Every plasma bolt, every missile explosion, every particle beam added its energy to the Terran Vanguard's power reserves. The ship's energy signature, already off the charts, began climbing exponentially. "Thank you for the recharge," Sarah said, knowing her transmission was being picked up by every sensor in the system. "Humanity learned something interesting from studying your weapons. Energy is energy. You throw it at us, we use it against you." She pressed another control, initiating causality torpedoes. Target, Frigate Line Delta. This time the Crythian ships exploded before the Terran Vanguard fired. The weapon hit them retroactively, the torpedoes arriving at their targets a fraction of a second before they left the launch tubes. It was time manipulation on a scale that made quantum entanglement look simple, and it was completely devastating. 15 Crythian frigates detonated simultaneously. Their crews never even saw the weapons coming because, from their perspective, the weapons had already arrived. War Chancellor Velkoth's voice came through on an open channel, raw with disbelief. "What are you?" Commander Okonkwo's response was matter-of-fact. "We're human, War Chancellor. We're the species you all ignored while we learned everything you knew and then figured out what you didn't." 3 minutes had passed since the engagement began. 300 Crythian ships were destroyed or crippled. The remaining intercepting force scattered, their formation broken, their confidence shattered, and the Terran Vanguard simply stopped, hanging motionless in space, its weapons powered down but ready. Silence filled every bridge, every command center, every observation station across the Axis Prime system. What they had just witnessed was impossible. The Crythian Empire didn't lose battles. They especially didn't lose battles against single ships crewed by species that supposedly had no military capability. Yet the debris field told a different story. Hundreds of Crythian vessels drifted in space, their hulls torn open, their systems dead, their crews either gone or desperately transmitting distress signals. And at the center of it all, the Terran Vanguard waited like a predator that had proven its point. Commander Sarah Okonkwo checked her tactical display one more time. The remaining Crythian intercepting force had retreated beyond weapons range, regrouping near their main fleet. Smart move. The main battle group, those 9,000 ships that had been waiting so confidently, now hung in space with their weapons armed but not firing. Also smart. "Open a channel," Sarah commanded. "All frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear this." The comm system acknowledged. Sarah took a breath, thinking about how to phrase what came next. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 times during the long voyage to Axis Prime, but now that it was here, the words felt heavy. This is Commander Sarah Okonkwo of the Terran Vanguard to all vessels. What just occurred was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The Crithian ships that were destroyed because I chose to destroy them. The ships that remain because I chose to spare them. This distinction is important. She paused, letting that sink in. War Chancellor Velkoth, your flagship is currently in my targeting solution. It has been since I entered the system. I have not fired on it. I will not fire on it. Not because I cannot, but because humanity did not come to this system to wage war. We came to ensure that you understand the consequences of starting one. On the War Chancellor's flagship, Velkoth stared at the tactical display with an expression that his crew had never seen before. Fear. Not the adrenaline-tinged fear of combat, but the deep, existential fear of realizing everything you believed was wrong. War Chancellor, his tactical officer said quietly, our sensors confirm her claim. The human ship has had a target lock on us since it entered sensor range. The fact that we're still alive is because she wants us alive. Velkoth's four hands clenched into fists. 3,000 years. 3,000 years of Crithian supremacy, of unbroken victories, of other species bowing before their military might. And now this. One ship, one human. One message that changed everything. Back at the assembly station, Ambassador Chen stood and walked to the central podium. No one laughed this time. No one whispered. Every eye was fixed on him with expressions ranging from shock to fear to something that might have been hope. Honorable Assembly, Chen began, his voice steady. I apologize for the dramatic nature of this demonstration. Humanity would have preferred to reveal our capabilities through diplomatic channels. However, the War Chancellor's ultimatum made it clear that diplomacy alone would not be sufficient. He gestured to the holographic display still showing the Terran Vanguard. What you witnessed today is the result of 50 years of work. When Earth joined this assembly, we were excited. We saw a galaxy full of ancient species with thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. We asked questions. So many questions. Questions about physics, about engineering, about the fundamental nature of reality. A Gen engineer, unable to contain himself, blurted out, "You stole our technology." Chen shook his head. "No, we learned your technology. There's a difference. The Gen Consortium has the best fusion reactors in known space. You shared the basic principles freely, as all assembly members do. We studied those principles, thanked you, and then asked ourselves, what if we approached the problem differently? What if we didn't just improve your design, but reimagined it from scratch?" He turned to the Elthari representative. "Your people taught us about psychic energy, about manipulating reality through force of will. You told us humans couldn't do it because our minds were too chaotic, too fragmented. You were right. But we learned that our chaos could be useful. We couldn't manipulate reality through mental discipline, so we built machines that could harness our chaotic thinking patterns and convert them into quantum uncertainty fields. The Elthari's watery form shimmered with something that might have been respect," Chen continued, addressing the entire assembly now. "Every species here contributed something to the Terran Vanguard, whether you knew it or not. The Crithians taught us about military doctrine and tactics. We studied every battle you've ever fought. We learned how you think, how you plan, how you execute, and then we designed our ship specifically to counter everything you do well." War Chancellor Velkoth's voice came through the communication system, harsh and bitter. "You tricked us. You pretended to be weak while you built weapons in secret." "No," Chen said firmly. "We didn't pretend anything. Humanity genuinely had no warships when we joined this assembly. We built mining vessels and colony transports because that's what we needed. But we also learned very quickly that this galaxy is not a safe place for weak species. We saw how you treated the Yithrin Collective. We watched what happened to the Selvier when they couldn't meet your tribute demands. We learned that in this galaxy, strength is the only thing that matters." He leaned forward, his hands gripping the podium. "So we made a choice. We could remain weak and hope for mercy, or we could become strong enough that mercy wouldn't be necessary. We chose strength, but not the kind of strength that conquers, the kind of strength that protects." On her ship, Sarah monitored the communication while keeping her sensors locked on the Crithian fleet. They were still at high alert, still armed, still dangerous, but they weren't advancing. That was something. A new voice entered the channel, this one belonging to the coordinator of the assembly. Ambassador Chen, the assembly requires clarification. Is the Terran Vanguard your only military vessel? Chen smiled slightly. No. The single word sent ripples through the chamber. If humanity had more ships like this, if they had built a fleet in secret, then the entire balance of galactic power had shifted overnight. How many ships do you have? The coordinator pressed. Enough, Chen replied. Enough to defend Earth and our colonies. Enough to defend our allies if they request our aid. Enough to ensure that no one can threaten us with ultimatums or demands for surrender. But not so many that we could conquer the galaxy even if we wanted to, which we don't. Velkoth's voice cut through the channel again. You expect us to believe that? You have weapons that can destroy fleets, and you claim you don't want to use them? War Chancellor, I expect you to believe what your sensors tell you. Commander Okonkwo destroyed a fraction of your intercepting force. She could have destroyed your entire fleet. She didn't. That should tell you everything you need to know about humanity's intentions. Sarah decided it was time to add her own voice to the conversation. War Chancellor, I'm not a politician like Ambassador Chen. I'm a soldier. Well, I used to be a physicist, but these days I'm more of a soldier. So let me speak plainly. I don't want to fight you. I don't want to fight anyone, but I will if I have to. And if I have to, I'll win. Not because I'm better than you, but because I'm more desperate than you. She pulled up a file on her display and transmitted it to the Crithian flagship. Those are the specifications for the gravitational lance that destroyed your dreadnoughts. It's a weapon system based on research from the Duravian archives that your species destroyed 700 years ago. The Duravians figured out controlled singularity centuries ago. They tried to share the technology peacefully. Your people killed them for it and classified their research as too dangerous to use. Sarah's voice hardened. We found those archives. We decrypted them, and we didn't think the technology was too dangerous. We thought it was too important not to develop. Every weapon on my ship came from somewhere like that. Research you suppressed. Technologies you banned. Theories you called impossible. We took all of it, refined it, and built something that you were too afraid or too arrogant to create. War Chancellor Velkoth stared at the data streaming across his displays. The human was right. He recognized some of the theoretical frameworks, saw references to projects the Crithian military had shut down as too risky or too resource-intensive. Projects that had been filed away and forgotten. Humanity hadn't forgotten. They'd found every discarded idea, every abandoned project, every theory that was deemed too dangerous or impractical, and they'd made them work. Stand down your fleet, War Chancellor, Sarah said quietly. Tell your ships to withdraw from the frontier sectors. Then we can talk about peace. Real peace, not the kind built on threats and fear. For a long moment, no one spoke. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the War Chancellor's response. 3,000 years of military tradition, of pride, of unbroken victory, all hung in the balance. Finally, Velkoth's voice came through, quiet but clear. Fleet, this is War Chancellor Velkoth. All vessels are to stand down and withdraw to the outer marker. Combat alert is suspended. Across the system, thousands of Crithian warships began to move, pulling back from their positions, powering down their weapons. It wasn't surrender, not exactly. But it wasn't war either. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly continued long into the night cycle, though night and day were artificial concepts on a space station. Ambassador Chen returned to his seat and waited as representatives from dozens of species processed what they had witnessed. Some still stared at the holographic displays showing the debris field. Others were in heated discussions with their home governments through quantum-linked communicators. The Aelthari representative was the first to speak after the long silence. Ambassador Chen, I believe I speak for many in this chamber when I say that humanity has fundamentally altered our understanding of galactic power dynamics. However, I must ask, why reveal this now? Surely the strategic advantage of secrecy was valuable. Chen nodded, having expected this question. Because secrecy only works until it doesn't. The Crithian ultimatum made it clear that passive diplomacy was failing. We could have waited, let the frontier sectors fall and maintained our secret. But then what? How long until the Crithians decided to expand toward Earth? How long until another aggressive species made similar demands? We revealed ourselves now because this was the moment we could make the greatest impact with the least loss of life. Least loss of life? A representative from the Torvan Union stood, his feathers bristling with agitation. Hundreds of Crithian soldiers died today. 342, Chen said quietly. I asked Commander Okonkwo for the exact number before this session. 342 Krithian personnel died today. That's 342 too many in my opinion. But War Chancellor Velkoth was preparing to attack the frontier sectors. Our intelligence suggested his initial assault would kill approximately 2 million civilians in the first wave. 342 deaths to prevent 2 million. That's the calculation we made. He let that sink in before continuing. And if you think I'm happy about that calculation, you're wrong. Every time humanity uses violence, we fail. But sometimes we fail less badly than the alternative. The Gen Consortium's lead engineer stood, his multiple eye stalks fixed on Chen. You said we all contributed to your ship's technology. I want specifics. What did you take from us? Your fusion reactor designs were revolutionary, Chen acknowledged. Your magnetic containment systems are the most stable in the galaxy. We studied them for years. Then we asked ourselves, what if we didn't try to contain the fusion reaction? What if we let it expand into a controlled dimensional pocket where the energy buildup couldn't hurt anyone? That's how we generate the power for the gravitational weapons. Your principles, our application. The Gen engineer sat down slowly, processing this information. Chen could see the wheels turning, the engineer already imagining the possibilities. Over the next few hours, the assembly transformed from a place of fear to one of frantic calculation. Species that had remained neutral suddenly wanted to know Earth's position on various territorial disputes. Smaller civilizations that had been oppressed by larger ones began asking quiet questions about defense pacts. The entire political landscape of the galaxy shifted in real time. Ambassador Chen fielded questions until his voice grew hoarse, but he never lost his diplomatic composure. Yes, Earth was willing to share defensive technology. No, they would not share weapon systems that could be used for conquest. Yes, humanity was open to mutual defense agreements. No, they would not become the galaxy's police force. The Krithian representative, War Chancellor Velkoth, had remained silent since ordering his fleet to stand down. Now he stood, and the chamber fell quiet once more. Ambassador Chen, Velkoth began, his voice different from before, lacking the arrogance that had characterized his earlier speeches. The Krithian Empire has existed for 3,000 years. We have fought thousands of battles. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. In all that time, we believed ourselves to be the apex predators of this galaxy. Today, you proved us wrong. Chen waited, unsure where this was going. Among my people, Velkoth continued, there is a saying, strength honors strength. We respect power above all else. What Commander Okonkwo demonstrated today was power beyond anything we have encountered. But more than that, she demonstrated restraint. She could have destroyed my flagship. She could have killed me. She chose not to. The War Chancellor's scales shifted color, a sign of deep emotion among his species. I came to this assembly prepared to conquer. I leave it humbled. On behalf of the Krithian Empire, I formally withdraw our claim to the frontier sectors. Furthermore, I wish to open negotiations with Earth regarding a non-aggression pact. The assembly erupted in chaos. The Krithians didn't negotiate. They didn't withdraw. They certainly didn't ask for peace treaties. And yet here was their War Chancellor doing exactly that. Chen stood and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. The Krithian Empire's offer is accepted. Earth would be honored to negotiate such a pact. The session finally adjourned in the early morning hours. Chen returned to Earth's quarters on the station, exhausted. He found Commander Okonkwo already there, having docked the Terran Vanguard and made her way through the station. She'd changed out of her combat suit into a standard Earth Fleet uniform, though she still looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I hate politics, Sarah said by way of greeting. Chen laughed tiredly. I know, but you did well out there, Commander. I killed over 300 people, Ambassador. You saved millions. Sarah slumped into a chair. Doesn't make me feel any better about it. They sat in silence for a moment, two humans carrying the weight of what they'd done. Finally, Chen spoke. Do you know what frightens me most about today? What? How easy it would be to become what we fought against. We have the power now, Sarah. We could make demands. We could take territory. We could become the new Krithian Empire, and most species would be too afraid to stop us. Sarah nodded slowly. That's why we built failsafes into the Terran Vanguard and her sister ships. The quantum cores can only be activated by human neural patterns. and only by humans who pass specific psychological evaluations. The weapon systems have built-in restrictions. We can defend, but the ships physically cannot be used for offensive conquest. We coded that limitation into the quantum level of the systems themselves. I know, Chen said. I helped write those protocols. But there's always a way around limitations if you want it badly enough. Then we have to want the right things badly enough, Sarah replied. We have to want peace more than we want power. Chen smiled. When did you become a philosopher? Somewhere between learning to create artificial black holes and actually using them to kill people tends to make you think about the bigger picture. In the days that followed, the galaxy began to adjust to its new reality. The Terran Vanguard remained docked at the assembly station as a visible reminder of Earth's capabilities. But 3 more ships arrived within the week. Darwin's Reach, Unconquered Light, and Defiant Horizon. Each one was similar to the Terran Vanguard in design but specialized in different areas. Together they represented humanity's complete military capability, and humanity made sure everyone knew it. Transparency, Chen explained to a group of skeptical representatives. If we hide our strength, you'll always wonder if we have more. If we show you everything, you know exactly what we can and cannot do. It builds trust. The Crithians were true to their word. War Chancellor Velkoth personally returned to the assembly station to negotiate the non-aggression pact. The negotiations were surprisingly cordial. Sarah, at Chen's request, participated in several sessions, and she found herself developing an unexpected respect for the War Chancellor. You fight well, Velkoth told her during a break in the negotiations. Your tactics are unconventional but effective. You fight well too, Sarah replied honestly. Your fleet regrouped and adapted within minutes of the initial attack. Less experienced forces would have routed completely. Velkoth's scales shifted to a pleased pattern. We Crithians have always respected worthy opponents. It is refreshing to encounter one after so long. The non-aggression pact was signed 3 weeks after the 4-minute engagement, but it was more than just a promise not to attack each other. It included provisions for joint training exercises, technology exchanges in defensive systems, and even cultural programs. The Crithians wanted to understand how humanity thought, how they approached problems so differently. We have spent 3,000 years perfecting one way of war, Velkoth explained during the signing ceremony. Perhaps it is time we learned another way. Perhaps it is time we learned your way. Other species watched this development with fascination and no small amount of concern. If the Crithians and humans formed an alliance, who could stand against them? But Chen and Velkoth were careful to frame their agreement as defensive, not aggressive. They were not forming a military bloc to dominate the galaxy. They were forming a partnership to ensure peace. Smaller species, those who had lived in fear of Crithian expansion, began approaching Earth with their own requests. The Yithrin Collective asked for protection. The Selvier wanted defensive technology. The Torvan Union proposed a mutual defense treaty. Chen handled each request carefully, always making clear that Earth's goal was not to create an empire of dependent clients, but to foster a galaxy where strength didn't automatically mean conquest. 6 months had passed since the 4-minute engagement that changed the galaxy. The assembly station looked the same from the outside, but inside everything was different. Where there had once been tension and fear, there was now cautious cooperation. Where there had once been a strict hierarchy of strong and weak species, there was now something resembling equality. Ambassador David Chen stood at the observation deck, looking out at the ships docked around the station. Human vessels were no longer uncommon sights. The Terran Vanguard, Darwin's Reach, Unconquered Light, and Defiant Horizon all hung in space alongside Crithian dreadnoughts, Aelthari meditation ships, and Gen research vessels. The mixing of so many different designs created a strange kind of beauty. Still can't quite believe it worked, can you? Commander Sarah Okonkwo's voice came from behind him. Chen turned to see her approaching, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in months. She'd been running training programs non-stop, working with officers from dozens of species, and it showed in the tired but satisfied expression on her face. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Chen admitted, waiting for some species to decide they'd rather take their chances with conquest than cooperation. Sarah joined him at the window. There are always going to be ambitious people, ambitious species. But I think we made the cost of ambition high enough that most will think twice. Most isn't all. No, Sarah agreed. But most is better than we had 6 months ago. The observation deck's door opened again and War Chancellor Velkoth entered, his massive frame barely fitting through the doorway. He'd been on the station for the past week, participating in joint planning sessions for the Galactic Defense Network. His presence still drew stares from other species, but the stares were different now. Less fear, more curiosity. Ambassador Commander. Velkoth greeted them with the slight bow that Krithians use to show respect to equals. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, War Chancellor, Chen said. We were just discussing the future. Velkoth moved to the window and looked out at the assembled ships. My people have a saying, the future is written by the strong. I used to believe that meant the strong would dominate the weak. Now I understand it means something different. The strong have a responsibility to ensure there is a future worth writing about. Sarah smiled. That's surprisingly philosophical for a warrior. Warriors have more time to think than you might expect, Velkoth replied. Especially warriors who have been humbled. Tell me, Commander, do you regret what happened that day? Sarah considered the question carefully. I regret the deaths. Every single one. But I don't regret the choice to act. If I hadn't done what I did, we'd be preparing for a war that would have killed millions. So yes, I regret the cost. No, I don't regret the necessity. Velkoth's scales shifted to a thoughtful pattern. A good answer. Among my people, we have a concept called strength with wisdom. It is rare. Most warriors are strong but foolish. Most wise beings avoid strength. To have both is exceptional. I don't feel exceptional, Sarah said. I feel like someone who got lucky that the physics worked out the way it did. Luck is also a kind of strength, Velkoth observed. The strong make their own luck by being prepared for opportunities. Chen's communicator chimed. He checked it and smiled. The vote is in. The Galactic Defense Network Charter has been ratified. We're officially operational. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, absorbing that news. The GDN represented something unprecedented in galactic history. A voluntary alliance of species committed to mutual defense without any single dominant power. Earth had provided the initial technology and training, but every member species contributed something unique. The Aelthari offered their psychic early warning systems. The Zhen contributed their engineering expertise. Even the Krithians had volunteered to help train ground forces. I should inform my government, Velkoth said. They will be pleased. Krithian security has never been stronger. Despite having fewer enemies than at any point in our history, it is a paradox we are still learning to understand. After the War Chancellor left, Chen and Sarah remained at the window. More ships were arriving, these ones smaller, bearing the markings of species that had previously been too afraid or too weak to participate in assembly affairs. Now they came, knowing they would be heard, knowing they would be protected. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd failed? Sarah asked quietly. If the Krithians had destroyed the Terran vanguard in those first few seconds? Every day, Chen admitted. But we didn't fail. We prepared, we adapted, and we succeeded. That's what humanity does. We fail, we learn, we try again. The difference this time was that we learned from everyone else's failures before we had to experience our own. Sarah nodded. I've been thinking about going home. Back to Earth. The training programs are running smoothly now, and there are other commanders who can take over. Tired of space? Tired of being the woman who beat the Krithian, Sarah said. That's not who I am. I'm a physicist who learned to fly warships. I'd rather go back to being a physicist, maybe teach at a university, help train the next generation of scientists. Chen smiled. You've earned it. When do you want to leave? After the dedication ceremony next week. The Selvier are unveiling a monument to what they're calling the 4 Minutes of Freedom. Apparently I'm supposed to give a speech. What are you going to say? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I'm going to tell them the truth, that I was terrified the entire time, that I'm not a hero, just someone who did what needed to be done, and that if they really want to honor what happened, they should work every day to make sure no one ever has to do it again. The dedication ceremony took place on the Selvier homeworld, a beautiful planet with 3 moons and purple skies. Representatives from across the galaxy attended. The monument itself was a massive structure made of crystallized light, showing the silhouette of the Terran vanguard surrounded by symbols representing all the species of the assembly. Sarah's speech was short, just as she'd planned. She spoke about fear and necessity, about the cost of violence and the value of peace. She ended with a simple request, Don't remember me. Remember what we all learned together. That strength without wisdom leads to destruction. That wisdom without strength leads to oppression. We need both. We need each other. The crowd applauded, but Sarah noticed that many of them were from species that had suffered under Crithian expansion. They weren't applauding her words. They were applauding their freedom, their newfound safety, their hope for the future. War Chancellor Velkoth approached her after the ceremony. "Commander Okonkwo, I want you to know something. When I return to the Crithian homeworld next month, I will be stepping down as War Chancellor." Sarah was surprised. "Why? Your people respect you more than ever." "Exactly," Velkoth said. "They respect me because I learned to respect others. That lesson is my legacy. But the Crithian military needs leaders who grew up with this new understanding, not warriors like me who had to be forced to learn it. I will become an advisor, a teacher. Just as you planned to become," Sarah smiled. "Maybe we're not so different after all." "Perhaps not," Velkoth agreed. "Perhaps that is humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not your weapons or your technology, but your reminder that we are all more similar than we think." 3 months later, Sarah Okonkwo stood in front of a classroom at MIT, looking at 40 eager students who wanted to understand quantum mechanics and space-time manipulation. She'd traded her uniform for civilian clothes, her warship for a small apartment in Cambridge, her role as a warrior for her role as a teacher. She loved it. Ambassador Chen visited her once, bringing news from the assembly. The Galactic Defense Network was functioning better than anyone had hoped. Several minor conflicts had been resolved through mediation rather than warfare. 2 species that had been preparing for war had instead formed a trade partnership. The galaxy wasn't perfect, but it was better. "Do you miss it?" Chen asked her over coffee. "The ship? The action?" Sarah thought about the question seriously. "I miss the certainty. When you're in combat, everything is clear. You know who the enemy is, what needs to be done. Teaching is messier. Students ask questions I can't always answer. Progress is slow. But you know what? I think this is more important. Every student I teach might go on to make something amazing. Every mind I help develop might solve a problem we haven't even thought of yet." Chen smiled. "That's very optimistic for someone who used to create artificial black holes for a living." "Creating black holes taught me about destruction," Sarah replied. "Teaching teaches me about creation. I prefer creation." In orbit above Earth, the Terran Vanguard sat in a secure dock, her weapons powered down, her systems on standby. She was ready if needed, but the need was becoming less likely with each passing day. Beside her, Darwin's Reach, Unconquered Light, and Defiant Horizon rested similarly, powerful but unused. The hope was that they would never be needed again. The reality was that they probably would be someday. But that day seemed further away than it had 6 months ago. Ambassador Chen continued his work at the assembly, building relationships, mediating disputes, pushing always for diplomatic solutions. War Chancellor Velkoth, now simply Velkoth the Advisor,